Okay, so I'm continuing my game between Janowsky and Alapin, played in 1905. Basically, it's White's 18th move, or will be White's 18th move, and the position here is that for White has a very good game. It controls this d6 square, which is going to become a pivotal square for White, and also it's going to seek to control this d file, and Black's going to have to try to basically fight toe-to-toe. So now White plays rook on c to d3, basically doubling the rooks on the open file. Black decides to oppose on the open file, or if it doesn't, it's probably going to find itself in trouble because it'll just put the rook right there on d7. White plays rook to d6, and now Black will take the rook, and White will retake with the pawn, giving it a passed pawn. So now Black's going to have to keep this pawn from becoming a queen, and White will now just try to, promote the pawn. So now the queen has to move. It steps in front of the pawn. White plays e4, planning on playing e5, giving nice support to the pawn. And now Black's going to play c5, sort of getting its bishop in the play, and probably also planning to play c4, trying to shut out the bishop. A good attempt might have been possibly to try to prevent e5 by playing f6, but this loses to queen to g4, attacking the e6 pawn twice. Black has to defend rook to e8, but then White has this sweet little thing of bishop takes e6, check, rook takes, queen takes d7, and White's going to promote the pawn. And if Black just takes the pawn, then White recaptures the rook, and then White's basically won the exchange there. So that doesn't work. So Black plays c5. White plays e5. Now White has a protected passed pawn. Black plays c4, shutting out the bishop. The bishop just comes back to c2. And now White plays queen. Black plays queen to c6. Basically, what Black's going to do is it's going to change up the blockader. Queen's a very valuable piece. You don't really want it as a blockader, so it's trying to switch around the blockaders, and now it's threatening mate on g2. So White plays f3. Black plays queen to c5. Just not giving needless checks, but the idea is that the black squares have become weak, and this is helping to control some of the black squares. King to h1. Rook to d8, placing a blockader, but the rook has to come to be better in d7. Now White plays queen e1 with the idea of coming over to the h4 square, getting the queen over on the king side. Black plays rook to d7, so now the blockader has been switched. White plays h3, giving the king. Before we could have some back rank mate problems possibly, so White plays h3 to give its king some room. And now Black plays bishop to c6. Once again, planning to exchange off the blockader here from the rook to the bishop. And now White plays f4. Not really to support the pawn, which is not a bad idea. But now White plans on ramming home a pawn. It sees that this bishop here is pointed to the king side. Its queen can come to the king side, so it's going to try to bust up the pawns and win. Black plays rook to a7, planning to play the bishop back to switch off the blockaders. f5, and now was trying to knock a hole in Black's pawns. It would be very tempting for Black to play something like on this. Well, it's going to play bishop to d. Oops. I'm sorry about that. It's going to play bishop to d7, but it's very tempting, or it looks very tempting for white to play e takes f5, but then white has the nice move e6, which gives it two pawns on the sixth rank that are going to sort of just bulldoze right into queens, and if black takes the pawn here, white's just going to recapture with check. So not a good idea to capture that pawn, so black plays bishop to d7. And now white continues with f6, just barreling the pawn right down. It's going to punch a hole in the pawn somewhere. And now what does black do? Well, once again, it may look tempting for black to take the pawn, since it almost looks like it's for free. And I can take it for free and then be attacking the e5 pawn. But if black takes, then the nasty continuation of queen to g3, king to h8. If the king goes to f8, it's going to be eventual mate with bishop to h7, because the king's going to have to run this way and has nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. So king to h8, queen to f4, threatening to take the pawn. f5. This is just a possible continuation. There are some other moves, but this seems to be the best continuation in my opinion. Queen takes, king to g8, and then rook to e1 with the idea of a rook lift over like this. Okay, so that's why black didn't take, but then plays g6. Queen to g3, threatening to take the g6 pawn and win immediately. King to h7, up to protect it. h4, gonna now ram another pawn home. Sorry that I'm going a little fast, but I'm running out of time. Queen to c8, queen's coming back to come over here and protect. h5, queen comes over to protect. Now the rook comes up to d4, it's gonna slide over and attack. The bishop comes back to protect along this line here. Rook to h4. Now threatening sort of a take and a rook sacrifice on. That's what's white is threatening. So queen to f8 to protect that pawn. Rook to g4, renewing the threat on the g6 square. Queen comes back. Queen to e3, threatening up some other mating attacks. Now the rook comes over to defend the blockader. Rook to h4. Just some back and forth threatening of pawn exchanges, and this with the king being here, this pawn is actually pinned. Sorry that I'm not able to go through all the variations, but I am running out of time. Queen f8, protecting that. Anytime the rook is here, there's a threatening sacrifice mate. g4. Now white brings up the other pawn for the breakthrough. King to h8, and now take. Rook takes. Rook intervenes. Rook takes. King takes. Queen to g5, threatening the check here since his pawn is pinned. Queen to f7. Check. King comes back. And then bishop takes pawn. And now it's really trouble because if the queen moves away, black loses the bishop. And the problem is it looks like black can win this bishop, but it can't. The reason being queen takes, and then if bishop takes, this pawn rolls in, and black resigned in that position. So I'm sorry that I didn't go through some of the very last variations there when the rooks and pawns were over here, but if you study it for yourself, you'll notice that there are mating attacks and breakthroughs. And that ends it for that game.